Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Scyushi and today I'm going to be doing a starter guide to Path of Exile 2. Now keep in mind, I am brand new to Path of Exile. I never played Path of Exile 1. I mean, I did, but just barely. It doesn't really count. So I wanted to kind of go through all of the problems that I came about and kind of share these experiences with you guys to hopefully help you out at the start of the game. Some of these tips might actually end up being useful for you PoE1 fans as well, because there's been a lot of changes between the previous game and the sequel. So first let's talk about raw stats, because they're actually really different in this game. Essentially, Path of Exile lets you build any character the way that you want, so long as you have the stats to actually equip the gear. So strength is utilized for heavier armors and melee weapons and stuff, but the only thing that it ends up actually benefiting for you across the board is you'll end up getting 2 life for every strength stat, and by having more strength, you'll also be able to equip more strength gems, as you can see up here, which is something that, we'll get into gems in a moment. Intelligence will end up giving you 2 mana for every int slot, and dexterity is a little bit more complicated, so we gotta get into it, because it's going to end up giving you evasion rating and accuracy. So evasion rating is a chance to avoid enemy strikes, which is physical attacks, not necessarily big ground pound attacks and stuff, or projectiles. It all depends on the player's accuracy versus the enemy accuracy. So the accuracy rating, for every 1 dexterity, you get 5 accuracy rating. Accuracy is used to hit a target with an attack and is checked against the target's evasion to determine the chance. Spells don't count as attacks. Attacks are basically melee and physical attacks with like arrows and ranged stuff. So you gotta be very careful to pay attention to the wording in this game. And for each strength, dex, and intelligence, it gives you more slots for support gems, which are going to end up being red, green, and blue respectively. For spellcasters, you might notice that a lot of your gear doesn't actually have any raw damage numbers. Usually it'll end up being status effects or stuff that's out of the skill tree that will ultimately end up giving you more boost to magic damage, for example. But you can always end up going through this screen looking at all of the different resistances and stats and everything that you end up having. And if you're ever curious about your actual raw damage, you can see the DPS of a spell when you end up having it socketed. It's not going to show you the DPS of absolutely everything, so sometimes you gotta open this little tab right here. And this is also where you'll be able to see the crit hit chance. Now, certain spells and even weapons will have a base crit hit chance percentage, and any crit hit chance that you end up getting on top of that with gear is just going to increase that by multiplicative. I always mess up this word. Basically, if you have something that does 10% crit chance, and then you have an item that gives you a 10% crit chance boost, it's not going to give you 20% crit chance, it's going to give you 10% of that initial 10%. This is why there's so many crit damage or crit hit nodes in the skill tree and so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. So an energy shield is literally like a halo shield. My face cam's blocking it, but basically it goes beside your hotbar. And it can soak up a certain amount of damage and then it begins to recharge, unlike your life bar, which you just take the raw damage. Armor is essentially a physical damage negation, so it's just as important as getting resistances to the various elements. And then, of course, there's also going to end up being evasion, which is more so utilized for melee characters. But okay, let's get into the skill tree, because I know what you're thinking. This is incredibly intimidating. It's not as bad as you think. There's a lot to learn here. There's a lot to digest, for sure. It can be very overwhelming at first. But here's the thing. This skill tree is every class's skill tree. The only difference is where you start. So the witch and sorcerer both start up here at the top. I'm pretty sure sorcerer does, whereas the monk is in the top right. And I don't really know about all the era classes just yet because I haven't experimented with all of them myself, but that makes the skill tree a lot more digestible. The skill tree also might look really chaotic and weird at first, but then you start to notice these little things like this icon right here. Isn't that looks like a dagger? This looks like a twin staff or something. And maybe this is a rapier, this is a bow, this is a spear. Spears aren't in the game yet or anything like that. But once you start to see all these little icons, it does make the readability of the skill tree a lot better. And the cool thing with the skill tree is you can essentially just build your character in any direction that you want. They have what they call these highways. So these long spanning straight lines that go through the skill tree are so that you can cut across and get into the skills of other classes that might end up benefiting your build. Like I've seen monks that will end up speccing into some warrior skills because they want to use a great hammer to bonk things. Another thing really important to your character is the Ascendancy. So eventually you'll get to this point in the game where you'll have these Ascendancy trials and you'll be able to get Ascendancy points. I'm just going to say this outright. Make sure that you look into the skill tree and think very hard about the Ascendancy that you want to take, or frankly speaking, wait until you have a better understanding of the game. Don't make the same mistake that I did and so many other necromancers did and spec into Blood Mage thinking that it's good. I'm half joking. Blood Mage is actually really powerful, but it makes you more of a spellcaster more so than focused on minions. And I want to play this character so that I can use minions. Now, as we transition into talking about drops and loot, last stat that is kind of important is Magic Find will affect everything, currency and item drops. But now let's get into the stash tabs. So I'll talk a little bit about the currency tabs as well as the tabs that you definitely want to go for early on. But there's also just going to end up being these base tabs, and you do got to keep in mind that you can adjust these. So you could actually set this tab right here to only put currency. And what that's going to do is anytime I end up, like if I'm on this tab, like let's say I open my stash and I just try to plop this currency in, it would have gone to this tab. So it's a nice way that even with the base vanilla tabs, you can kind of sort stuff, but the premium tabs are premium for a reason. Now, something to keep in mind, and I'm gonna try and rush this video out for you guys for this, is that the stash tabs actually go on sale every weekend. I didn't expect that to happen with PoE2 already. I heard friends say that it happens with PoE1, but the fact that it happens with 2 is awesome. So you definitely want to take advantage of it. I would highly recommend, let's see, let me actually go to the stash tabs themselves. Gem tab, very important. Flask, not so much. Premium tabs have a benefit, but we're gonna go for the quad tab instead. The reason why the quad tab is so expensive is a base premium tab is the same size as a normal tab, but it essentially allows you to recolor it as well as put stuff up to the player market. But the quad tab is quad the size. So in my opinion, it's just far better for your storage. It ends up just, I don't know if it's necessarily worth just buying like a whole bunch of these onesies versus a big one. Currency tab's really important. Essence tab is really important. You can just buy normal extra stash tabs. I don't know why you would want to. Unique stash tab is only for freaks that are trying to collect every unique item in the game. I'll probably end up getting this just because, well, yeah, you know what? I gotta show it off in a video anyway, right? Yeah, let's just do it. I also don't have the Delirium stash tab, so I'll grab that one as well. This is something more so for the end game, so it's not super important. But honestly, the cosmetics in this game are so expensive, I don't think I'm going to end up buying any costumes until something really, really cool gets in. The cosmetics I got right now is just because of the early access pack. Let's look at the stash tabs themselves. So first of all, you can see the sorting is very, very nice. Here's a primary, this is the quad tab. This is gonna be very, very big. It's basically like a guild stash, but of course it's yours. The advantage of this stash tab is that at any point you can end up, how do I do this? Sorry, I had to take a minute to mess with this myself. But yeah, basically I can end up setting this tab to public, and then you can end up setting an individual price, negotiable, or whatever. Basically, this is going to end up making this stash tab and the items that you've selected available on PoE which is like the website. So people can end up literally searching for various items and see your prices for these various items. And then they'll end up messaging you in game and you have to go and trade with them. This is how players end up trading gear. The Forge tab, let me actually grab this out of here just so I can show you guys the reason why it's designed the way that it is because you can just click and use any of these items on this slot right here. The other thing that's really important is normally these items will stack up to 30, but having it in this slot in this premium tab will end up having that value increased. I think to like 99. I don't know the exact number. Before I get too ahead of myself, while we're in the forging tab right here, keep in mind what all of these modifiers end up doing, because this will end up upgrading a normal item into magic with a single modifier. Kind of bad, but okay to use at first. This will augment a magic item with a new random modifier. Up to a certain point, it'll only be able to have so much. This upgrades a normal item to a rare with 4 modifiers. These are really, really good, because the thing that's so cool about this game is you can find a white piece of gear and it might even be more valuable than finding a yellow or a unique, just because of the potential that it could end up upgrading into, right? And then the Regal Orb upgrades a magic item into a rare item, adding a single modifier. There's a couple different items as well, like this augments a rare item with a new modifier. There's one that will end up removing a modifier to replace it with another random one. There's one that'll end up reallocating the stats of the modifiers, because they can be a random numbered amount of, like you can see right here, maximum life on this can go from 70 to 84. So I got pretty lucky and got it to 81. There is also the Chaos Orbs, which are very, very risky, because they will essentially have the potential to make an item go over its cap, but then the item is corrupt and you can't do anything with it, and there is the potential that it'll just completely ruin it. As for all of these forging items, these are also important. Martial weapons are basically all the physical based weapons. This will improve the quality of armor, so it'll increase the base stats of the armor. This will increase the quality of a wand, staff, or scepter. For necromancers in particular, this will end up boosting your spirit. This will end up adding a socket to one of these various items, which would be awesome. And then the sockets themselves are going to end up being these little runes right here. So it'll just say outright, this will give 10 mana per kill if I put in a weapon, martial weapon in particular, not a wand. Or if I put it in armor, it'll give 15% increased mana regen. These various items down here will stack up to 10 and then become one of the various other items. The jeweler items, this will end up giving you an extra slot up to 3 on a support gem. Or support gem slot, and then this will increase the quality of the gem, which essentially just makes it more powerful. So something that you'll try to keep in mind when you're dealing with all of the forging stuff is there's always going to end up being a character you can disenchant. So you can disenchant blues to get the transmutation shard. That's very quickly going to become useless. I still disenchant yellows because that'll end up giving me the better shards. But if you end up seeing items that are socketed or that have a higher percentage of quality, you'll actually want to salvage it, because by salvaging it, we'll end up getting these fragmented artificer orbs, which will eventually, be able to combine into a full orb that you can then end up using to give some more rune sockets and stuff. It's just really, really useful to end up destroying items and dismantling them, and then pretty much just focus on selling items when you absolutely need gold. The gem tab is also really useful because it'll sort gems by level, and then you can go skill gem, support, persistent buff, uncut, so on and so forth. It's really, really nice. The essence tab is going to end up being for the various essence items, which again, you can end up putting on gear. And then I haven't even seen these tabs, but this is going to end up being the unique tab. So what that essentially means is if I take this unique and this unique out of storage here and basically plop them, where is it? I gotta set this tab to uniques, and then if no matter what tab I'm on, if I control click, they just throw them into this stash tab. And then at any point I can just go focus. Okay, here's one of the focus items. I know that I have 50% of the unique crossbows, so these are right here. Really, really insanely handy for collecting freaks, and I'm probably going to try and collect everything long term. And then as far as this last tab is concerned, frankly speaking, I haven't gotten into maps yet, so I don't really know what all of this is about. I'm just saying that you'll probably want to end up buying a bunch of the currency and buying a bunch of the stash tabs during the weekend. Oh dear Lord, that was a lot of time spent on the stash tab. Okay, another thing that I don't know if console players will have access to, but in the game tab of your options, there's the item filter. So if you can end up finding an item filter online, you'll just end up clicking this to open the filter folder, and then you take that filter you find online and put it into that filter or folder, sorry. The item filters are insanely cool because it'll basically be something that somebody has customized to highlight the various items. They can make it so that gems show up on your mini map, or that various items that have higher quality will end up having enlarged text. So you really get to see very clearly the various items that you come across. I'm assuming people are working on like an end game filter, because I could see it potentially getting annoying seeing like all of the white items that I don't want. So now let's move on to the gems. And this is actually the biggest, coolest point of this game, because the gems are essentially the skills in this game. And if you have the right stats, you can use any skill gem. So something to keep in mind is that you'll have to have a certain amount of strength, dex, and intelligence based on the amount of support gems. So as it says right here, list how many support gems you can have of each attribute, and you can only have one support gem per 5 points. So you can see I don't have enough dex right now, like I'm missing dex to have. So you can see this is socketed, but I'm not actually seeing the effect of this because I don't have enough dex in order to have this equipped, because it is a green gem. But let's talk about the skills themselves, okay? So let me hop over into my gem tab and just go through these. So there's a skill gem type. This will end up showing you all of the recommended skill gems for your current character, but again, you can use anything. These are classes and weapons that aren't currently in the game right now. So you can kind of get a sneak peek of what's to come. But yeah, crazy that you can basically just build your character however you want. You can look at all the gems at once. A skill gem being increased to a higher level will usually end up making it cost more mana to cast, or whatever, but it'll end up making it more powerful, whether it be your minions just being stronger or taking less spirit to end up casting them, so on and so forth. Support gems, on the other hand, are pretty much the exact same, where they're going to end up having some recommendeds for you, but you can always look at everything. So this is where people can come up with some absolutely cracked builds, because the game isn't going to necessarily tell you all of the gems that'll end up synergizing with the way that you've got your character set up. And lastly, of course, there are the spirit gems, which these are usually going to end up being like passive buffs to your character, or cast on minion death, or cast on crit, which is a big one lots of people are building around. Once again, you can use any of these. So as a little example, you could have a fire necromancer that has the spirit gem cast on ignite. So as you ignite enemies, you'll end up having various spells cast off of them. And if you end up having like a cast on ignite, or like a spell like blasphemy, for example, where it makes your curse skills just apply an aura around you, the way that you'll end up actually equipping the associated spells is you have to put the spell into the support slot, and then that spell is going to benefit from any further support gems that are there. But in some cases, if you have the energy for it, you could actually just put a whole bunch of curses into here. Another thing that's really cool with the combat depth is that certain elements will actually synergize with one another. So if you put like a gas cloud on the ground and then you hit it with fire, it'll actually ignite in a puff of flame that'll end up doing a huge heap of damage to the surrounding enemies. Pretty much all of these spells can end up synergizing in one way or another, except for chaos magic, near as I can tell. Chaos magic synergizes with chaos magic. A lot of these skills involving chaos are to apply some sort of a debuff to an enemy and then stack a bunch of other debuffs on the enemy to make it spread like poison. Another thing you want to watch out for when you're playing with a party of people is usually you can just warp to your friends, right? But it'll end up warping you to the nearest waypoint rather than right on top of your buddy. So this is where, if you're playing with a homie, just get them to throw down a town portal, and then you take that town portal from town and you'll appear right next to them. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't take for granted the fact that this might be your first ARPG, in which case there are waypoints on most of the maps in the game. Usually they're in very obvious spots and will allow you to re-teleport to an area. You can also, if you ever want to reset an area, when you're inside a zone, you open up this menu and there'll be like a respawn at waypoint. Your map will end up staying the same. The maps are random generated, by the way. But most of all, it's so that you can respawn all the enemies or respawn a boss so that you can farm stuff. If you're absolutely struggling with the game, make sure to note the monster level of the area and just kind of stick around that monster level to grind a couple levels, because it's more beneficial to do that than go into an area you can't handle. Also, when you're playing in a party, and let's say you're getting carried by your homies, the party leader has to make note of this. So the default level downscaling, basically, if you have this enabled and you're playing with somebody who's low level, it'll boost you down to their level or bring you down to their level so that that player can benefit from the experience points, but you yourself don't really get that much. You'll be a lot weaker, but you'll still have access to all of your spells and your synergy abilities, so you'll still be able to kick ass. The point is, if you're speedrunning a homie through the campaign, you do want to grind levels for them, so make sure that this is enabled, whoever's the party leader, and maybe when you end up getting to a boss, you could disable it, and that is in turn going to allow the strong character to deal all of their damage to the boss, so they can just kill it, and then you can turn it back on for normal mobs. But if you're noticing you're super duper weak, chances are you need to upgrade your gear. I know that you can see a lot of the passive abilities and be like, well, these passives are really good. I don't want to necessarily get like an upgraded pile of gloves. But if we actually look at the level, this item level is 41, which means I technically could get an item level 60 and then upgrade that, and it would have much higher potential. And lastly, the most important thing of all, is this game worth buying right now during early access? Yes, 100%, why haven't you bought it already? Seriously, this game is $30 US and you get more content out of it than most of the Diablo games, never mind Diablo 4. As an old school Diablo fan, this is a love letter to Diablo 2. And it's so much better because it expands the genre with Souls-like inspired combat. It can still be really hard to tell what the hell is going on when all of your different particle effects are going on depending on your build. But generally speaking, the combat is very well televised and a lot of fun. But if you don't care about playing the game right now, maybe you're a little too busy with life stuff, or maybe you just don't have the funds to drop down on the game, you can wait, because this game, once it comes out of early access, is going to be free to play. Now, they said it's going to be upwards of 6 months, possibly a year before the game ends up going out of early access. But we're going to continually get a lot of content ingested into the game during the early access phase. So right now there's 6 classes. At full launch, there will be 12 classes, so literally double. There's also the Ascendancies, which we've got 2 per class right now. This is basically a subclass, specialization or something. In the full game, we're going to have 3 Ascendancies per character. There's also a lot of weapon types that aren't in the game right now, like increased spear attack speed. There's no spears yet. As far as I know, the next classes that we're supposed to be getting is the Shadow, which I think is the dual dagger rogue guy, and the Druid, which is going to be the transform into a giant werewolf. Apparently, he's going to have 3 different transformations. Either way, I would highly recommend this game right now during early access because it sure as heck doesn't feel like early access, and these developers are on it, dude. Anything that people have been complaining about, they have adjusted so quickly, it's actually insane. If you enjoyed today's video, I would appreciate if you would hit that like button, subscribe button, notification button, all the buttons. There's so many buttons on this platform, I don't even know which button you should and shouldn't press. I'm going to be covering a lot more Path of Exile in the future. I love this game, and if you love it, you should hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification button, all the buttons. I'm putting my advertisement at the end of the video rather than at the beginning, so come on.